AOC's Fight for the Future. This is from GQ magazine, and I spared you the close-up of AOC's face, which is a picture. Well, it's kind of like barely. It's right here. It's up above. That's her sweatshirt that she's wearing there. I'm not gonna torture you with that. I know that it would make a lot of you vomit if you were watching the screen when I showed you that. Although for some reason I've heard a lot of men claim that she's attractive, and I'm like, okay, I guess if you like ugly women, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. This is an interesting article about AOC, and we're going to dive into it. It's pretty long, but I'm going to cut out as much as I can. Thank you all for stopping by. I do appreciate everybody supporting my work that I do here on this channel. Don't get much support. The people that I do have, I appreciate you being here. I wish I could give you more somehow. Give you more attention, more time. I know some of you leave comments and stuff. I don't have time to get to them right now. I've been pretty busy. And if you would help me out by leaving a comment down below, that helps the algorithm. Dropping a like on this video, sharing the video, and watching it to the very end is also another way to help the algorithm. But let's dive into this article. Almost 4 years after her improbable arrival in Washington, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has become the political voice of a generation and a cultural star whose power transcends politics. Now, as the country hurtles towards the midterm elections, AOC opens up about the battle over abortion, her own shot at the presidency, and why it's critical that men step up now, man. You better step it up. You're just dropping the ball left and right. But that would be patriarchy, wouldn't it, if men stepped up? For her 2 years in Washington, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked the few blocks from her apartment to her congressional office nearly every morning, a routine she felt forced to change after a treasonous mob stormed the Capitol. Now she drives, most days, a comically short commute she considers a necessary safety precaution. But for some reason, she's not quite sure why. The Congresswoman decided to walk to work on what would become Washington's most tumultuous morning since the insurrection. I can tell you why she walked, because she knew there was going to be a decision, and she knew it was going to be a negative because it was leaked that it was going to be negative. And she wanted to be able to interact with people on the streets. And she drives a comically short commute. You know why she drives a comically short commute? Because she can't be bothered to walk. Why is this a big deal? Why is it a big deal that she walk instead of drive? Why am I making a big deal out of this? Because she is the one pushing the Green New Deal. She is the one who wants us to cut back on emissions, to cut back on carbon, to cut back on using things that we don't need to use to make our lives better. She is driving because she doesn't want to walk. It's not because of safety. Believe me, it's not because of safety. She's going to go into how her life is in danger. Don't worry, we're going to get there, but it's not because of safety. As she reached the Capitol grounds on June 24th, a group of men stopped her for a photo.
I said hello, and how are you all doing?
She'd later recall,
They're like, well, we've definitely been a lot better skipping this morning.
This was how the Congresswoman learned that the Supreme Court had gutted the constitutional right to abortion established by Roe v. Wade. It was never a constitutional right. The ruling had been anticipated for weeks after a draft opinion from the court's conservative faction leaked. See, right there. They even admit that it leaked. Did she not know that it was happening on the 24th? She probably did. I'm sure she knew everything about it. But somehow, much of Washington still managed to appear blindsided. Democrats had expected to spend the afternoon celebrating the passage of the new gun control law. Now their day had morphed into a wake. Yeah, gun control law, just what we need. Out on the steps of the Capitol, a group of lawmakers gathered to sing God Bless America, a pre-planned photo op that now read as hopelessly out of touch. Angry Americans were spilling into the streets, and elected Democrats were singing campfire songs. Ocasio-Cortez knew where she needed to be. It wasn't at a sing-along. Oh, you think? Do you think that a politician, a leader of the country, especially on the federal level, ever needs to be at a sing-along?
Sometimes people ask, oh, what's the point of protest?
She told me later, recalling that day, the act of protest, she said, creates community, and participation by political leaders sends a message.
It's really important for people to feel like their elected officials give a S about them.
She said, not from on high, but from the same level. Yeah, well, maybe if you acted like it, then they would know that you actually do. I'd arrived at the Supreme Court a few minutes before Ocasio-Cortez to interview protesters and watched as she maneuvered in her plaid pink pantsuit past a small circle of anti-abortion demonstrators and then waded into the sea of women and men who'd gathered to mourn. Soon she was speaking into a borrowed megaphone, helping to lead the call and response.
Into the streets!
Ocasio-Cortez shouted, pumping a clenched fist in the air. Within minutes, a sobbing young woman found the congresswoman and threw herself into her arms. I'm so scared, she wept. I'm so scared. Of what? Of what? Of what? What are you scared of? Do you think that because you're not able to get an abortion, people are going to hunt you down and imprison you? Now, you think that you're going to get pregnant and then need to get an abortion, and then you're going to be breaking the law, and then you're going to go to prison. Maybe you think that. I don't know. I mean, that'd be the only thing that you would be scared of. But here's the problem with that line of thinking. The illogical issue that you're grasping. You're dealing with emotion instead of rationality. You don't have to have sex. Oh my goodness. Guess what happens when you don't have sex? You cannot get pregnant. It's amazing. You know what you could do? Instead, you could have butt stuff. Butt stuff is good. You should do that. All these women here, they should start doing butt and mouth stuff. Problem solved. At least for the men. Now, there's like how many different types of birth control? Abortion is primarily used as a form of birth control, not for the health of the mother, just as a way of birth control. But you can just use some form of birth control. There's all sorts of different options. And like I mentioned a moment ago, the one that I mentioned, actually I mentioned 3 different options. Those don't lead to pregnancy. They really don't. So, I don't know what to tell you. You don't need to be scared of this. You just don't have, there's how many millions of men in this country, adult human males, that are virgins? There's how many millions of men in this country that cannot get a person to engage in this activity with them whenever they want to. However, typically, young women between the ages of 18 and 28, whenever they want it. Typical young woman between the ages of 18 and 28 can get it whenever. Yet you're so very oppressed. For a fleeting moment in front of the Supreme Court, it was possible to see the full, complicated public totality of the woman we've come to know as AOC, a 32-year-old second-term congresswoman representing one of the country's most diverse districts, a certified celebrity. A certified celebrity? There's a certification for that now? Okay, that's news to me. Arguably more famous than any other person in American politics without the last name Obama or Trump. Beloved and loathed at competing ends of the political spectrum. Constitutionally opposed to sitting down, shutting up, and conforming to the patriotic play theater of Washington. Yeah, she's not conforming to the patriotic play theater of Washington. Take it away, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Hate me, you still need to know this, okay? So when I got kicked off committees, I was like, all right, I'm brand new here. I want to learn how this place works. And here's what else you need to understand. If you're the minority party, no one in the minority party has control on committees. The majority party has control on committees. So if Democrats are in control, they're controlling the committees and they control what bills are actually voted on. Republicans have no choice. We can't put a bill to the floor unless we have 218 signatures to pull it out, and we don't have 218. So being in the minority, committees are pointless for us. So I got kicked off committees and I was like, okay, big deal. So I go sit on the House floor, just sitting there watching what's happening because, again, I've never been elected. I've never held office. I didn't even go to the local GOP meetings because I thought they were silly and stupid.
Until now, you mean?
Until now. Yeah, and then I go. But here's what happens. So they were debating a bill back and forth, and they're debating it back and forth, and there was someone sitting in Nancy Pelosi's seat, the speaker's chair. Was not Nancy Pelosi. I don't know who it was because they had a mask on, and everybody wears masks, and I was like, okay, I don't know who that is. It was actually a man. So they're debating back and forth, and then the guy up there holding the gavel in the speaker's chair calls for the vote by voice. So the Democrats, there was about 5 of them on their side, and there was about 5 Republicans on our side. The Democrats, it's their bill, so they're like, yay, and they're saying, yay, they want to vote for it. The Republicans on our side, they're used to getting defeated at this point because we're into February, and they go, nay, without enthusiasm. And then all of a sudden, the guy up there, Speaker Mask Face, he gavels it in. The bill has passed. And I was like, I'm sitting here holding my voting card in my hand, and I'm like, I didn't vote. And I was so confused. So I call one of the Republican floor staffers, and I'm like, what just happened? And he goes, ma'am, that's how we pass bills. The bill just passed. And I said, what are you talking about? There's 435 members of Congress. There's like 10 people that said yay and nay. I didn't even vote. I didn't say anything. There's a machine. So here's what we have. On every other row, there's a little machine. It looks like a credit card machine. And I have an ID card. It looks like a driver's license. As a member of Congress, you put it in there, and there's 3 buttons you can push. You can push green for yes, red for no, and then there's a yellow one that's for present. I don't know why you need present, but whatever. So I didn't get to vote. No one else voted. It was not recorded. So here's what I found out. Most of the bills in Congress are passed with a voice vote, meaning millions and millions and billions of American taxpayer dollars are passed that way.
So why isn't Ocasio-Cortez challenging this system, this joke of a system that we have? The right wing's night terror in the flesh. Oh, that's what she is? She's the right wing's night terror in the flesh? Okay, then. According to these insane people, I am on the right. I'm like super extra amazingly right. She doesn't scare me. Too many foot soldiers of the fractured, contradictory coalition that is the progressive left. She represents something singular, the future, a revolutionary on the rise, the clear heir to an ascendant progressive movement, the best and possibly last, depending on how quickly some combination of fascism, religious fundamentalism, and climate change comes for us all. A source of hope that things can get better in their lifetimes. Yeah, okay. Fascism is akin to the left. Religious fundamentalism. Okay. Religion is being foisted on all of us when they're talking about how many genders there are. When these progressives are talking about how many genders there are. That's not religious fundamentalism, but it's a type of religion that's being foisted on us. Climate change will eventually get us all, but that's not going to happen for a while.
A lot of that was a human need.
Ocasio-Cortez said of why she took to the streets that day.
About providing just a very real position that this is not over and we're not giving up.
Oh, look, there she is in probably $1,000 gown because GQ can afford to dress her up and say, look how amazing she is. This does not make me think of Ocasio-Cortez as one of us fighting for us. It makes me think of she is a demigod. Look at the way this photo is shot. She's on the steps, some Greek-style building, and she's above us, and she's perfect in the picture. So, yeah, okay. Our conversations came as the fallout from the Supreme Court decision and the looming likelihood of another Donald Trump presidential campaign had Democrats, including the Congresswoman, wondering if they might actually find a way to hold on to Congress in November. In those weeks after Roe's demise, Ocasio-Cortez was ubiquitous. Oh, she was, huh? At rallies and on TV, demanding that their colleagues move with urgency to protect access to reproductive health services and calling on men in particular to share their stories of how they had benefited from decades of legal protective abortion. The battle for bodily autonomy and human dignity, she said, will only be won if men themselves join in the fight. Okay. Men have benefited from this, no doubt, because men are forced to pay child support. Men are the ones who are forced. They can't opt out of it. So there's been a lot of men out there who have not been forced to pay child support because a woman aborted the child. Maybe the men didn't even know. I mean, when I was living in Minneapolis, a place where George Floyd mouthed off to the police and got himself killed, I worked at a restaurant, and we had a new girl. She's cute. Not the most amazing looking girl, but not bad looking at all. And then this pig that I worked with, guy's a pig. I mean, I'm not saying all men are pigs. I'm just saying this particular guy, pig. He seduced her, and they did the deed, and she got pregnant, and then she opted to get an abortion. Now I'm stuck here. I mean, I wasn't really stuck, but they both talked to me about the situation, and I'm like, I'm neutral on this. I have no talk in this fight. But he was against her getting an abortion. He was 100% against it. That's the point of this story. He was mad at her. But, you know, hey, she made the choice to get raw dogged by this piece of garbage. I mean, I guess he had a nice face. I don't know. I'm no judge of men, I've been told. He wasn't very tall. He's only like 5'8". But yeah, he could seduce the ladies. And so he seduced her. She got pregnant, and then she's going to get an abortion. And, you know, they're all complaining to the staff about each other. And it's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. She ended up quitting over it too. Because why would you want to work there with that situation? So yeah, men have benefited from this for sure, but what about the men who don't want this to happen to their child? They have no say in it. They have no say, and you want them to step up. That's patriarchy. You can't have men step up because you're going to scream patriarchy, so men don't step up.
For almost every woman that has gotten an abortion, there's a man who has either been affected or liberated by that abortion too.
She told me.
In this moment, it's really only going to be the vulnerability of men and men talking to other men that gives us the greatest hope of shifting things the fastest, soonest.
Yeah, but you don't want men's input. You only want them to give their input if they agree with you. Trust me, that's what this is about. If she goes on to Terrence Popp's show and listens to Terrence Popp and Blake talk about how they're against abortion, she doesn't want to hear from those men. She does not want to hear from those men at all. We'd agreed at the onset of our conversation that day to lean into difficult questions about gender, with a specific focus on what men need to be doing to combat misogyny. And so I asked the Congresswoman why she believes men so often opt out. Certainly some guys are just jerks. But what about men who are more introspective? The call for men to step up and speak out is neither new nor novel, yet still seems unheard. You've been telling men to shut up so that you can have the stage for how many generations now?
I think there's plenty of well-meaning reasons why men may feel like it's not appropriate for them to talk about it.
She continued.
I think sometimes the way white folks don't like to talk about race, and they say, we just want to center the person who's most impacted, so it's not my role to do anything, or take a space and speak up. But we know that when white folks take up space and say the right thing in rooms of other white people, that is the most shifting activity that can happen. More sometimes than any protest or any person writing a letter to the editor or anything like that. And we need men to be speaking up in that way as well. But I think men, sometimes they think, I'm not a woman. This doesn't affect me the most.
No, men have been told not to speak up. White people have been told that we're not allowed to have a voice. So we don't speak up about race because there's actually nothing to speak about race. We have already solved these problems. We already solved the problems of race. Everybody's equal under the law. What can you do? Everybody's equal under the law. I can't solve the problem other than that. That's it. That's the extent of solving the problem. You want reparations because your ancestors were treated unfairly, and that makes it unfair for you today, right? Are you sure about that? Are you sure? Because I don't have a pot to piss in, so here's a white guy going, yeah, my ancestor gave me so much. You're right. Yeah, I got land, I got money, I got all this stuff. Nope, not happening. But men also keep quiet, Ocasio-Cortez pointed out, because of the burdens and antiquated expectations of masculinity. Oh yes, the patriarchy. Feminist writers and thinkers have raised this notion for decades, pointing out how men themselves are victimized by toxic societal constructs.
Men suffer from being under patriarchy.
The congresswoman said.
They don't go to the doctor. They suffer from much greater rates of completed suicides. Even though they report lower levels of depression, that doesn't mean that they suffer from it less. Just a couple years ago, the American Psychological Association released a very deep paper and a campaign about how these traditional cultural markers of masculinity, stoicism, competition, domination, dominance are leading to mental health issues for men. There's a stigma around men being vulnerable.
Stoicism, competition, dominance, domination. Yeah, okay. Can you define these things? You don't even know the definitions of these words, I'm sure. But on top of that, the problem is not stoicism. That's the problem, really. That's what it comes down to, not being stoic. Not going, hey, you know what? I feel feelings, I feel bad about this, but I have to put that aside and do a job. That's just life. I can't wallow in my feelings. That's what's causing a lot of these problems. Feminism. Foisting these ideas that how you feel is most important. Let's all feel. Let's all be feel. Oh, indulge your feelings. Do whatever makes you feel good. Instead of going, you know what? I feel a certain way. I don't have to act on those feelings. I can put the feelings aside and do what I need to do today. The key to combating that stigma, she said, is for men to talk directly with other men. Wouldn't that be patriarchy?
I think something that's really powerful for men is to share their stories of growth.
Oh, that's not patriarchy, huh? Okay. I asked her about men who may be angered by the conservative attacks on bodily autonomy and committed to personal change but carry shame about past behavior. They too should speak up, she replied. It's not about men posturing in public as if they are perfect, she said, rather explicitly noting that they are not.
There are amazing men in this world, and not men as a final product. There are men on incredible journeys, internal journeys of transcending beyond just anger as an acceptable masculine emotion.
She would tell me in a subsequent conversation.
Men who dive into their compassion, into their sadness, into their insecurity, and explore it and work through it. The most powerful and persuasive things a person can say on any given issue.
She told me that first day we met in her office.
Is sharing their personal experience and personal story.
Really? That's the most powerful thing anybody can say? I hope not, because your personal experience and personal story aren't necessarily that important. You're one individual. So if you experienced violence from, say, a group of individuals, but you're the only human being ever to experience violence from that group of individuals, therefore, you should share that experience, and we should make laws to curtail the activities of that group of people who committed violence against you. Short-sighted, narrow-minded thinking. Ocasio-Cortez knows well the power of personal testimony. She's become the most talented political communicator of her generation by being frank and relatable. Yeah, that's what's done it, Using her social media channels, for example, to explain policy in one moment and then share her struggles building IKEA furniture the next. Don't buy IKEA, it's garbage. Still, there are many aspects of her private life that she has historically guarded. When the insurrectionists stormed the Capitol, however, she says that something changed. She spent much of the day crouched in the corners of various congressional offices, convinced she was going to die. You mean when she was not there because she had left before the people entered the Capitol? We have timelines of this stuff. It's not difficult to figure out. She was gone. She used to be, oh my God, they're gonna get me, and it's like they're not even in the Capitol yet. What are you talking about? There's nobody in the Capitol. There's nobody storming the Capitol. But you're tweeting that they're gonna get you. Who's gonna get you? Weeks later, she took to Instagram to describe her experiences on January 6th, explaining that the day had stirred the remnants of past trauma. She publicly revealed for the first time that years earlier she had been touched in an inappropriate manner.
I could not talk about that day without disclosing it because it was such a central part of my experience.
Ocasio-Cortez explained to me.
I felt like I could not really adequately communicate what that experience was without giving people the context of what I had lived through and what was being echoed, because so much of it was about resonance and fear of a thing that was not theoretical, but a fear of a thing that I had experienced.
Look, there's a huge difference between what happened on January 6th and what supposedly happened to you. Let's go ahead and continue on with this, because she's going to talk about what supposedly happened to her. And you're going to see why it's supposed. Until that point, Ocasio-Cortez had told only 3 or 4 people of the assault. Now friends, acquaintances, and strangers were sharing with her their own stories. She had no intention of offering additional details publicly. But the night after Roe fell, she was addressing protesters who'd gathered at New York's Union Square, not far from the restaurant where she had worked at the time she was forced into intimacy. She told the crowd of the incident.
When I was about 22 or 23 years old, I was EPAR'd.
She said,
I was completely alone. I felt completely alone. In fact, I felt so alone that I had to take a pregnancy test in a public bathroom in Midtown Manhattan. And when I sat there waiting for what the result would be, all I could think of was, thank God, I have at least a choice.
Okay, so you don't remember how old you were when this terrible tragedy was foisted upon you? Really, you don't. I find that incredibly impossible to believe. You remember the day and time. I am certain. Look, if you've gone through this, anybody, man, woman, child, whatever, I feel so sorry for you. It would be horrifying just to think about for me to go through this. I don't think I can handle it. But I certainly would remember when it happened. I would remember the day and time. 100%. And you had to take a pregnancy test as a result of this? What, you've never been late before? By the time you were 22, you probably had been having your menses for what, 9, 10 years at that point? And you'd never been late. You'd never been late. You had to take that pregnancy test. Oh my gosh. I had this happen to me, and so I got to make sure that it's seriously? You expect me to believe this garbage? She's saying this to garner followers in her crusade to stand up against the cancellation of Roe v. Wade. That's what she's doing this. I'm certain that she probably did engage in some sort of intimate act with the man in question, but it was not forced. Let's read on and see what all she has to say. Ocasio-Cortez told me later that she had carefully weighed her decision to talk more openly about her experience since entering public life. Her opponents on both the left and the right have gleefully dissected her every utterance because it doesn't make any sense, and she didn't press charges, so what are you going to do? Hunting for ways to dismiss and ridicule her. She had no expectation the disclosure of her assault would be treated any more kindly or fairly.
One major trauma that a lot of survivors of this deal with is a struggle with being believed.
She told me, adding,
There are aspects of it that I may never share because of the trauma of having that experience litigated in public.
Or probably because you would be falsely accusing somebody of doing something to you that they didn't do, and that's illegal. Nevertheless, there was value she felt in sharing what she had endured.
It was someone that I was dating that I was not active with who forced himself upon me.
She told me. When she later confronted him, the conversation did not go well.
The instance of a denial of what happened that very, very clearly happened is also a through line with other women's experiences, friends that I've had, or just a pretending that whatever clearly happened did not happen. That too is also an assertion of power. And so this assertion of power and dominance over others is not limited to the actual physical act, but how things are treated afterwards.
Like I said, I'm sure she did stuff with this guy. I'm sure maybe they did butt stuff. I don't know. But it was probably more like she got drunk and he got drunk, and then they had this experience, and then in the morning she regretted it. How many times have we seen that happen lately? That the regret of the act has gotten the man in trouble. I regretted doing it. I wish I would have never done that. Oh, he took advantage of me. That's it. It was him. He was the evil, dirty man. I would never have slept with him if he hadn't lied to me. I would never have slept with him if I hadn't drank. He got me drunk. And that's how, it's like, if you were unconscious and he was not, then okay, yeah, I agree. That's wrong. But if you're both drinking and you're both conscious, you both are culpable. If she points the finger at this guy publicly, that's the end of her. That is the end of Ocasio-Cortez. She will be ousted from public office. She could even be arrested. So that's why she doesn't name any names, because that's libel and slander, etc. Eventually, she confided in 2 of her colleagues at the restaurant and learned that her experience had not been unique.
It was like everyone had been assaulted in this way that I had worked with.
She said, the entire population of the United States, all the women have just been, Look, I said it's terrible. It's tragic. I really do believe that wholeheartedly. It should never happen. That's how strongly I feel about this. It should be beyond human comprehension for this to happen. Yet it does. But it hasn't happened to everybody, okay? But, these progressives, who I'm sure she worked with because obviously she confided in them, she got along with them, so they must have been really progressive too. They probably feel the same way she did. Oh yeah, I was dating this guy and we got drunk and he did, I regretted it, so therefore it was. Okay. Ocasio-Cortez never reported her assault. Yep. A choice she knows is familiar for many women, and one she said she'd make the same way today.
If the vast majority of this happened by a familiar person, the last thing you're going to want to do is throw someone in jail.
Oh, really? Okay, give me a break. That is BS. I don't care if it's your best friend in the whole world. But I don't care if it was you and that man against the world, and then he did this to you. You put him in jail.
There is an intersection with the work of abolition and healing and contending with the fact that we as people are capable of doing harm, but we are also capable of healing from harm.
So would it be easier to heal if you press charges against the man who hurt you? Look, for whatever reason you don't press charges, that's on you. Maybe you have a reason, but it should not be because I don't want to hurt this person who hurt me. It should not be. I just want to put it behind me and forget about it. Part of that healing, though, is the acknowledgement and accountability that she was denied.
Whatever the given circumstances of a situation, if a person is hurt or harmed, it's important to hold space for it. And it's very, very, very difficult to hold space for a hurt person when you are the one they are saying hurt them.
When I asked how she'd advise a man in her life to respond when he confronted with an allegation of forced intimacy.
A lot of these people are not having these conversations with a pitchfork. These are people that very often are trying to heal, and they're saying, did what happen? It's not how do we punish, but how do we process, and how do we heal, and how do we change?
Maybe you did everything right, but it still happened. Oh, we'll skip past that photo. It's close up of her face. You want to see that. Ocasio-Cortez didn't register it at the moment, but looking back, she realizes that the incident helped propel her into public office. No, it didn't. What helped to propel her into public office was a company that said, hey, guess what? We can put you into Congress. You want to go to Congress? You want to be a congresswoman? And so then she hitched her wagon to that company, and sure enough, hey, what do you know? She became congresswoman.
My forced intimacy was a pivotal event in the trajectory that led me to run for office. I can say that in retrospect, but obviously I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, it didn't happen, so it didn't propel you. You had no intention of going into office until this company came to you and said, hey, you know what? We're going to make you a congresswoman, so let's do this. The story of a bartender who improbably swept into Congress is by now legend. How she spent her early adulthood navigating the financial downturn. You mean the Great Recession? The financial downturn. Yeah, that's never happened ever. It's the Great Recession, idiot, because it was the worst recession we've ever had. And the healthcare system as her father battled cancer. How she campaigned for Bernie Sanders and road tripped to protest the Dakota Access Pipeline, and how she took service worker shifts to support her family after college in the wake of her father's death. Service worker shifts, because she wasn't qualified to do anything else. Now we know about the personal trauma she was also navigating.
I didn't grow up in an explicitly ideological household,
she said of her upbringing.
I grew up in a household that was very conscientious of the world and cared about what was going on and paid attention, and my parents voted, but we weren't like, we're left, or we're right, or whatever that is. I grew up in a very socially conservative and very deeply religious household with very prescriptive messages about women. And it's not even sometimes that they're just handed down from your parents, but just from the culture that you live in. My experience with the forced intimacy forced me to confront all of these things that I was taught about my self-worth as a woman.
And do you think that maybe a very deeply religious household with very prescriptive messages about women was why you had to take a pregnancy test in a public bathroom for engaging in bad behavior that you weren't supposed to be engaging in until you were married? That might have led to you having a child out of wedlock? That's why you did that? You didn't want any evidence around you? You want any evidence in your home that there was a pregnancy test? I don't know why you couldn't just stuffed everything in your purse and then threw it away in a public bin. I'm sure they have those in New York City, don't they? On street corners somewhere? In the park, maybe? Like many young progressives, her politics fused the movements of her life, the climate and anti-war efforts of the Bush years, the boisterous street protest against unchecked capitalism and racial injustice that dominated the Obama years, the insurgent Sanders campaign and its demand that we reconsider the limits of what government can do for its citizens. The revitalized women's movement that followed the Donald Trump election. Climate and anti-war? I suppose. I mean, she's going to be 33 this year, I think. So when Bush came into office, that was 21 years ago. Yeah. She was like 12 when Bush came into office, so she probably wasn't caring about that stuff at 12 very much. Maybe a little bit, but probably not too much. Maybe, because he was in office for 8 years, so through her teen years, she probably got involved in it. Just wanted to check the math on that. With the 2018 midterms approaching, a team of Sanders devotees launched an effort to recruit like-minded progressives to run for Congress. Though hesitant at first, Ocasio-Cortez ultimately decided to become a candidate. The impetus for her run was largely frustration. No, the impetus for her run was a company saying they could make her a congresswoman. Because she ran in a district, supposedly, her district, you could put a glass of water down with a D on the side of it, and that would win. That's how Democrat-oriented her district is. For nearly 20 years, her district had been represented by Joe Crowley, a Wall Street-friendly congressman who served in the House leadership and was a presumed Speaker of the House in waiting. Crowley, she said, was out of touch with the needs of his district. Maybe if she did Marjorie Taylor Greene did, then she could actually change something in Congress. In one of the few interviews she's ever done about her daughter, Blanca Ocasio-Cortez told the Daily Mail about how her daughter got her name. It had been her husband's suggestion they call her Alexandria. I thought about it for a while, and I said, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she recalled. That sounds very powerful. That'll be her name. That sounds like something made up for a movie. Oh, the childbirth process, it was so difficult, but she's finally here. I've triumphed, and she's with us. I shall name her Triumph, for I know that she will overcome all obstacles in life. This ridiculousness. You expect people to believe this. And you know what the thing is I bet her followers do believe this. That's the scary part. 3 decades later, I asked the Congresswoman whom that newborn grew into whether she currently believes that she is powerful. She said, she doesn't define power as dominance over others. Then how come that's what you want? But that she does feel power over her own choices.
Sometimes I don't feel powerful. Sometimes I feel very diminished. And sometimes I feel the least powerful here.
I asked differently, does she feel politically powerful?
There's the political power of public opinion.
She told me.
There's the political power of social movements. There's the political power of platform. And in those ways, I feel powerful. But since I got here, literally day one, even before day one, I've experienced a lot of targeted diminishment from my party. And the pervasiveness of that diminishment it was all-encompassing at times. I feel a little more steady on my own 2 feet now, but would I say that I have the power to shift the elected federal Democratic Party? No.
Indeed, upon her arrival, the response from parts of the Democratic Party establishment was undiluted spite.
It was open hostility to my presence, my existence.
Ocasio-Cortez recalled. Her first days in Congress were destined to be awkward. Crowley still chaired the Democratic caucus, meaning he was present for new member orientation. Each newly elected Democrat was presented to their colleagues with music and a stadium-style introduction.
From the first district of this state or that state.
The Congresswoman said, mimicking a booming announcer's voice.
It would be just like these huge claps and whatnot. And then it came to me, and it was very clear that the reception was not the same. Just a smattering of applause.
Maybe it's because nobody knew who you were because you hadn't been playing the game very long. Maybe it was because you're so young and inexperienced. At one point, when Crowley was on stage, Ocasio-Cortez recalled that an older male member of Congress sat down next to her, gestured up at Crowley, and apparently not aware of who he was talking to, said, "It's a real shame that girl won."
I turned to him and said, "You know, that's me, right?"
She recalled.
And obviously his face turns pale.
Yeah, that sounds made up. People, maybe he was saying it to the person on the other side of him, and you overheard him, but I mean, I don't think he's going around saying that to strangers. Crowley had been a revered figure, and his defeat amounted to a traumatic event for many elected Democrats. If he could be beaten by a mouthy bartender, no less, were any of them safe? Ocasio-Cortez soon became a symbol, a proxy, more than a fully realized person. Her every move prompted a breaking news banner. As we discussed the generational splits across movements, specifically the now geriatric woman and black officials who... Why is black capitalized? Is this like is that an official thing now? I don't know what black officials are. They're decades after being elected at historic first. Oh, yes, black is referring to African. People of African ancestry. Ocasio-Cortez recalled the story of women's suffrage as depicted in Suffs, a play she'd seen recently. And we all know that plays are 100% historically accurate. I think they have to be. Otherwise, it's a felony, and everybody involved in the production of the play must be arrested and imprisoned for a minimum of 20 years. The movement was rife with tension between more seasoned suffragists who advocated a state-by-state strategy and younger activists uninterested in moving so slowly.
The 19th Amendment was passed by the younger guard.
Ocasio-Cortez noted.
It wasn't out of defiance of the older guard, but it was in incorporation of those gains in an attempt to accelerate them.
This generational tension has existed among
Virtually every single social movement in American history, in labor, in suffrage, in civil rights, in marriage equality. And it is a tension between history and the present moment. It's a tension between inside and outside. It's a tension between what we can learn and what we don't know. Any sort of criticism of the Democratic Party is immediately cast as helping the right, or you're disrespectful, or don't you know everything that these people have done? And we do. But we are also allowed to learn from the outcomes of those victories and the unique dynamics of the present moment. To also say that we have to change tack, and we can't just do the same thing for 30 years.
Though she may wonder how much power she really has, Ocasio-Cortez unquestioningly has influence.
I have always felt that the true power in the United States relies in mass movements and social movements. And there are many people who will not do something until they are forced, until their hand is absolutely and utterly forced, whether that be for decisions of self-preservation or otherwise. And so there have been moments when I feel like I have been part of influencing an outcome or a decision by the party.
Again, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
So the next time the bill came up and they were debating the bill back and forth, and I was really paying attention this time, and I had my lovely little book in my lap that I had the rules. The speaker up there, Speaker Maskface is what I call him because I didn't know who it was. He asked for the vote, the voice vote. And this time, so the Democrats are like, yay. And the Republicans over here, nay, because they're used to losing. And right as Speaker Maskface is about to gavel it in and announce the bill has passed, the rule is, as a member of Congress, and any of us can do it, you have to get to the microphone right then, and you have to say, Madam Speaker, I ask for the recorded vote. And I did call him Madam Speaker because gender doesn't count according to our rules. Sorry, anyone. But I did say that. I said, Madam Speaker, I asked for the recorded vote. So here's what happened. It was like just a complete change. When I asked for that, that means at that moment, they have to call all 435 members of Congress, no matter where they are, to come down and vote on that bill. And everyone is on record. That means you can look up how your member, your representative voted. You can look up your member, your representative. You can look up your member. People can look me up and go, did she vote for that or did she vote no for that? What did they do? What did AOC vote? What did Dan Crenshaw vote?
Now this system that she describes, I mean, I don't know if she's telling the truth or not, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but it's stranger than fiction, right? I mean, this is something that people it's so weird it's got to be true. Among these moments, she said, was early 2019 when she was one of the first elected Democrats to call for Trump's impeachment. Then in 2020, Ocasio-Cortez and Representative Rashida Tlaib from Michigan voiced criticism of the COVID economic stimulus. The legislation had provided for $600 checks to some Americans, but the Congresswoman said the payouts should be even bigger, introducing legislation to send out $2,000 checks. Yeah, the problem with sending out this money is that it was printed. It was printed money. It was not taken out of the tax revenue and then spread out more equally. Well, if you do that, I mean, you just devalue the dollar, and that's something that we should not do.
The whole party kind of chastised us and said that we were being wrong and unproductive and bad children, all that.
Ocasio-Cortez recalled.
And then the next morning, Trump came out in favor of it. And then the Democratic Party at that point, in that moment, found themselves to the right of Trump on this issue. And so they took the drafted legislation that Rashida Tlaib and I had introduced. They took it. They made it part of the American Rescue Plan, of course, without credit.
It's terrible. Terrible. I mean, it's so awful for you. You're a woman who is obviously oppressed because you're also a minority. Oh, gosh. I mean, how do you function, Ocasio-Cortez? How do you function at all being a minority woman in America, the most oppressed class of people ever? Oh, wait, that's right. You're part of Congress, the least oppressed class of people ever. After backing Sanders in the primary, the Congresswoman became an outspoken surrogate for Biden, helping unite the party in its efforts to oust Trump. Even so, party elders gave more time at the party's convention to literal Republicans than they did to Ocasio-Cortez. That doesn't matter. The slight was no surprise to the Congresswoman, who had spent much of the year defending herself against a primary challenger who had behind-the-scenes support from parts of the Democratic establishment in both Washington and New York.
I feel like everybody treated me like a one-term member of Congress, and they worked to make me a one-term member of Congress. There was a very concerted effort from the Democratic side to unseat me, and I felt a shift after my primary election, and it felt like after that election was the first time that more broadly the party started treating me like a member of Congress and not an accident.
They might have thought you were just a one-off, a fluke, and maybe that's why they didn't treat you. Like I said, you didn't earn it. You were propped up by a company that puts people into office. We all know that. Once she'd been reelected, the Congresswoman began enjoying the fruits of her labor in Washington. Biden named her co-chair of his climate task force, along with John Kerry, both Kerry, whom Biden would ultimately name his climate czar, and another White House official described her as a solutions-oriented team player. Despite the fact this whole article is talking about how you can't be a team player, how she's not a team player. That's how she gets things done. The Congresswoman recalled a bittersweet moment last year when President Biden visited her district with Senator Chuck Schumer after Hurricane Ida, and the two gave speeches about climate change.
Here were these two very powerful individuals, very powerful men, delivering speeches that were basically in their content and in their substance just complete Green New Deal framing. I'm listening, and I literally know that if I say and read that same exact speech, it is treated not just by the right, but by my own party as radical, impossible, flippant, uniform. But now the President of the United States is saying it, and so it feels very powerful because I wrote a lot of those words, that he wouldn't be invoking these frames if it wasn't for the work of movements and what we pushed.
The biggest win came in early August when Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, an omnibus budget bill that included $369 billion towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The only reason this is happening, said Lori Lodes, a longtime progressive operative and executive director of Climate Power, is directly because of AOC and young people rising up and speaking out and demanding. None of that is to say that the political establishment has become any more fair or her existing in Washington any more fun. In July 2020, Republican Representative Ted Yoho passed the Congresswoman on the Capitol steps and reportedly told her she was disgusting. Well, maybe she is. Maybe he's just pointing something out. You're disgusting. While later referring to her as an effing female dog. Yoho apologized but denied that he ever said the offensive name-calling words. Yeah, I'm sure he didn't. I'm sure she probably heard something and then she just jumped to conclusions. In May of 2021, Ocasio-Cortez was confronted outside of the House chamber by Marjorie Taylor Greene, a far-right member of the Republican caucus, who ran up to her and demanded she explain why she supports terrorist groups like Black Lives Matter, and insisted Ocasio-Cortez debate her radical socialist beliefs with her. According to two Washington Post reporters who were present last November, Arizona Republican Paul Gosar posted an online anime video that depicted him using swords to kill Ocasio-Cortez. Well, that's kind of in poor taste. I would not do that. But this whole thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she supports terrorist group, Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group, and demanding, she insisted. What does that mean? Can you tell me what insisting means? Does it mean like, hey, would you mind debating me? Or, hey, I want to debate you about this stuff. Or is it actually going, hey, you have to debate me. I need you to debate me about this. You should debate me because you're wrong. Okay, so what did Marjorie Taylor Greene say? We're listening to one side of the story, and we're listening to a person who's clearly insane talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's not here to defend herself. So I don't know what to tell you.
Others may see a person who is admired, but my everyday lived experience here is as a person who is despised.
She told me during my second visit to her office.
Imagine working a job and your bosses don't like you, and folks on your team are suspicious of you, and then the competing company is trying to kill you.
Yeah, I'm sure they're trying to kill you. It's the top advisor to another leading progressive official told me that Ocasio-Cortez seemed destined to inherit the leadership of the movement. Whatever Ocasio-Cortez decides to do, another top progressive operative added, will be consequential for every single person who cares about the future of the country. Oh, she's that powerful. Oh, interesting. All of the progressive political operatives that I spoke with said they were heartened by the number of leaders their movement has produced in recent years. Yet they all agree, when granted the ability to speak freely, that there is something special about the Congresswoman. Yeah, there's something special about her, all right. When I spoke with John Kerry, one of a handful of people with experience as a major party nominee, he wouldn't speculate about Ocasio-Cortez's political future, but was unequivocal that he believes someone like her, an outspoken progressive woman of color, could be elected nationally In America, anybody can grow up to be president, Carrie told me. I do believe that. Ocasio-Cortez used to believe that too. Then she became a congresswoman.
Sometimes little girls will say, oh, I want to be president, or things like that.
She told me when I asked about whether she believed that she or someone like her could ever lead our country.
It's very difficult for me to talk about because it provokes a lot of inner conflict in that I never want to tell a little girl what she can't do. I don't want to tell young people what is not possible. I've never been in the business of doing that, but at the same time... ...
Over the course of our conversations, the Congresswoman typically answered in a confident, fast-paced patter, each sentence closely chasing the tail of the last. But now her speech slowed to a crawl, and for the first time in the hours we had spent speaking, she broke eye contact, burying her gaze in the arm of her chair. Tears pooled in the corner of her eyes.
I hold two contradictory things in mind at the same time. One is just the relentless belief that anything is possible. But at the same time, my experience here has given me a front row seat to how deeply and unconsciously, as well as consciously, so many people in this country hate women. And they hate women of color. People ask me questions about the future. And realistically, I can't even tell you if I'm going to be alive in September. That weighs very heavily on me. And it's not just the right-wing misogyny transcends political ideology. Right, left, center. This grip of patriarchy affects all of us. Not just women, men, as I mentioned before, but also ideologically, there's an extraordinary lack of self-awareness in so many places. So those are two very conflicting things. I admit to sometimes believing that I live in a country that would never let that happen.
Well, maybe you should go back to Puerto Rico and tell the United States to F off. But the fact of the matter is, you're still alive. Yay, Ocasio-Cortez, you made it. Despite the video of you being killed by a sword. I'm sure that's out there somewhere, and probably go find it. Nobody's ever made parody of killing any other politicians, ever. History of humanity. But here you are. So you probably heard about this section here where she says, I don't think I'm going to be alive in September because people all hate me, blah, blah, blah. That's been kind of thrown around the internet. Well, now you can see it in nearly full context. I've cut out some of this. And you see what she was getting at. But the thing is there's not enough here that she has given us to believe that there's any kind of credible threat, and that she should believe there's any kind of credible threat. It's just outrageous. There would be other impediments, obstacles about which Ocasio-Cortez is practical, if not exactly optimistic.
Could Obama have got elected without the kind of financial support that he had?
She asked, noting that her opposition to Wall Street would be a major hurdle to any further rise. Even were she theoretically to become president, then what? She'd face a system, from the Senate to the Supreme Court, both empowered and inclined to thwart her most sweeping ambitions.
There are still plenty of limitations,
she said, playing out the hypothetical.
It's tough. It's really tough.
But so too is the current gig, serving in an institution loaded with structural and dispositional limitations.
Congress does not move first. It does not move early. It moves last. That is why we have never codified the right to bodily autonomy.
What are you talking about, bodily autonomy? You mean talking about the law to keep men from getting the ends of their wieners cut off? Is that what you're talking about? Or could you be specific? Really, this is ridiculous.
It's why we have never legislatively codified same-sex marriage or marriage equality.
What are you talking about?
And a whole bunch of other things. Contraception, none of that. Because it's easier to just let the courts do it, she said.
We're supposed to have a hands-off government. The Constitution is very clear about what the federal government is supposed to do.
We're going to need robust mass movements that have already started. We've seen it in the labor movement. We've seen it in racial justice. And we're going to need to continue to build that while also ensuring that we are staving off the very real threat of fascism and losing the House or Senate.
Yeah, I know, because Trump is a fascist, right? I pointed out to her that she had just made an excellent argument for why she shouldn't be in Congress at all and could possibly accomplish more elsewhere in a different elected office or as an outside movement leader.
I try to think about how I can be most effective and honest. And to this point, I have not come up with an alternative that I have found more effective than what I'm doing at this present moment. But this is something that I routinely revisit.
Uh-huh. You're not doing anything in Congress. We've seen Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about how it really works. In the whirlwind of the past 3 years, as she's grown from being a well-recognized politician to a bona fide cultural celebrity, Ocasio-Cortez, who friends say has always been more introverted than she lets on, I'm sure she is, has in understandable ways grown even more. These days, she told me, she avoids appearing in places where she's forced to play her part, where she can't just be herself. She's adopted a rule that she says her father deployed back when they lived in rougher parts of New York City. Once she's home for the night, she's in for the night. She leans most heavily on the relationships she's had the longest, the people who know her before she became AOC.
I worked very hard at trying to cultivate a non-attachment to all of this. I try to nurture non-attachment so that I think a lot of it is accepting that if all of this goes away tomorrow, I will not have an identity crisis, that who I am to me is separate from the material trappings of this work.
She met her partner, Riley Roberts, when they were both 19 and undergraduates at Boston University. When they started dating later in their 20s, neither of them suspected what they'd be swept up in.
For him to experience us dating when I was still working as a waitress and a bartender through now and seeing how the world responds, I think has been a very eye-opening experience for him as well.
Okay. Roberts has largely avoided the public eye as he and Ocasio-Cortez have adjusted to shuttling these past few years between New York and Washington, D.C. Just prior to the pandemic, after a long lobbying campaign from Ocasio-Cortez, the pair added Deco, the aforementioned French bulldog, to the mix.
I have very few dreams, like straight up dreams in my life. Since I was a child, I dreamed about having my very own dog.
When she spoke of Deco, she displayed more earnest excitement than at any other point in our conversation.
Dogs have a way of evening out the lows. It's kind of like a hard floor, and I definitely felt like my lows would be lower before him.
Yeah, you didn't have any dreams. Yep, you didn't have any dreams. Like that one dream you had to become Congresswoman, right? Mm-hmm. Said she didn't pursue that herself. Late last year, Ocasio-Cortez and Roberts found themselves discussing their New Year's resolution. Riley had a particular priority in mind. Oh, it's my resolution that perhaps we can be engaged by the end of the year, she recalled him telling her.
And I said, oh, really? Well, you're going to have to woo me. You're going to have to convince me after all this time why I should.
Yeah, sounds about right. Ocasio-Cortez told me that she never considered marriage inevitable. Her relationship with Roberts, who is white, oh, how dare he, raised its own particular questions about identity and belonging. She wasn't positive that an intercultural, interracial relationship would be the right fit for her. Sounds oasis to me. And then there was the fact that their lives had changed so much so fast. A lot of men, she told me, only believe that they want to be with an independent, successful woman. Only believe that they want that. Oh, okay. I don't know any man who believes that.
The moment you start being yourself, they kind of freak out. I think it causes a conflict within them that they didn't even anticipate. It's not even a deception. It's just they uncover insecurities that they didn't know were there.
When she first ran for office, Ocasio-Cortez wondered if that was destined to become the story of herself and Riley.
In fact, the opposite happened. Boy, he has been so supportive and willing to deeply engage. He's not a witness to this. He dives into the fray for himself in that he uses what we go through as opportunities for personal growth, and it's incredible.
In April, they got engaged while on vacation in Puerto Rico.
I feel like I won the men lottery in my life.
She went on answering a question I hadn't asked, listing off men in her life whose examples she admires. The father who set the gold standard, the cousins she grew up with in the South Bronx who overcame a lifetime's worth of adversity and are now raising children of their own, and even her chief of staff, Gerardo Bonilla Chavez, who leads her team with grace.
It is the presence of good men that has shown me what kind of men are possible in this world.
She told me at the end of one of our conversations, can you define good man for me? Please, Ocasio-Cortez. I need to know, because I need to know that I fit into this mold. Because obviously being stoic is not a quality of good men. You've stated this clearly. But I can tell you right now that stoicism is a quality of good men. It's a quality of men who don't let their emotions get the better of them. And we know what happens when men let their emotions get the better of them. There was just a beheading by a man in, San Carlos, California? This man beheaded his girlfriend because he let his emotions get the better of him? Yeah. Tell me stoicism is not a good thing. It was hard not to hear in these remarks an expression of the core belief at the base of her broader political ideology and outlook. The reality we wish for may be closer than we think. Sure, Ocasio-Cortez's political project would see us fundamentally restructure our society, but is that any less realistic than the hope that we'll one day eradicate misogyny, racism, and homophobia? You're never going to eradicate misogyny, racism, and homophobia as you define them, because they are part of human nature. People are always going to see the differences in race. People are always going to see the differences in gender. And people are always going to see the differences in sexual preference. Because that's who we are as human beings. Maybe in 1,000,000 years we'll evolve out of it. Maybe in only 100,000 years we'll evolve out of it. But 100,000 years is a freaking long time. Are progressive fantasies about replacing our nation's guns and capitalistic greed with guaranteed jobs and health care any more far-fetched than abolitionist vision of an America without slavery or suffragists' dream of a democracy in which her vote is counted? Are you kidding me? Really? We want to have guaranteed jobs? That's communism. That is communism. It's not even socialism. That's communism. The fight always seems less impossible, the Congresswoman reminded me, once you realize that we're not starting from scratch.
The world that we're fighting for is already here.
Ocasio-Cortez told me. It may not be all here. It may not be the majority of what's here, but it is undeniably here. Yes, communism is here. You're right. Very good. Yippee, we did it. We got the communism. China, I mean, they kind of had to manipulate it. They're just more of a dictatorship now rather than communist. But I think it still exists in North Korea. I know this is what you want because you just said so right here. You want guaranteed jobs. That's communism. Everybody had a job. If you didn't work, guess what? You died in communism. Most of the time, they just killed you. There's no other option. So that's what you want. That's what you people have elected, whoever elected her. Sorry for such a long video. I had to get through this article, though. I just had to talk about all the crazy that's in here. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I will see you in the next one.